The Coffee People podcast is presented by Roastery Coffee Packaging. Roastery is the digital printing company that makes custom printed packaging for coffee products. They create packaging that make even small roasters look like a really big deal. At roastery.com, you'll find out about their fast turnaround time, high-quality product, and low printing minimums. It's what separates them from the rest of the industry. Roastery will quickly become your favorite source for custom American-made product packaging. They work with small, mid, and large coffee roasters, so if you're ready to upgrade your coffee packaging, go to roastery.com to learn more and connect with the team. Link in this podcast's show notes. Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Coffee People podcast, which is part of the Roast West Coast Coffee Network. The show is presented by Roastery Coffee Packaging. You probably heard the ad at the top. If you're roasting coffee and you want some real good looking and sustainable packaging, check out roastery.com. I'm Ryan Woldt, and this is the Coffee Podcast, where we meet really interesting people from all corners of the coffee industry. I often leave these conversations inspired, and I hope you do too. Today, you're going to hear a conversation I had with Charles Carpenter of Tekwani Design in Denver, Colorado. After I record a show, I always make sure to check in with my guests right before airing an episode, just to see if something has changed or they had another thought to share. Charles sent me this note, quote, "I have both equal parts love for coffee and the people who raise it, so if any of this makes that better, then that's all I really want to do. I don't think anyone needs to feel guilty about this beverage. I guess if anything, a deeper love and respect for how it gets to our cup would make its future better all around." End quote. And that is why it is so easy to do this podcast. The guests are insightful, motivated, and often really give a hoot about other coffee people, and other people just in general. If you want to see some of the designs that the Tekwani team works on while you're listening, head to tekwanidesign.com or check out Tekwani Design on Instagram. Tekwani is spelled Tekwani, and the links are in the show notes. While you're scrolling, be sure to follow at Roast West Coast on Instagram and sign up for the newsletter on roastwestcoast.com. Okay, let's get into it over a good cup of coffee. I'm drinking a mug of Space Traveler that I brewed in the Simply Good Coffee automatic brewer. It's my first ever automatic brewer, and I freely admit this week has been a little bit of a wild adventure. Wherever you are out there, I hope you're having adventures too, preferably with a good cup of coffee, because it is time for this Coffee People conversation with Charles Carpenter of Tekwani Design.
So with fear and trepidation, I will go forward.
I almost spit out my coffee. If you wouldn't mind, for the people that will be listening to this, let us know your name, the name of your company, and what you do there.
So my name is Charles, and that depends on who I'm talking to. I have both. My dad's side's Carpenter English, and my mom's side is Romero. So I have a Tio Carlos. So Carlos, Carlito. I even have a friend call me Charlos. But so Charles, though, generally, unless I'm in Latin America, Carpenter. And I'm the owner and creative director of Tekwani Design Co. in Denver, Colorado.
Oh, I'm glad you said that because I've definitely been pronouncing that wrong. I apologize. Welcome to the Coffee People podcast. I always like when I have guests who are kind of outside the norm of what people think for coffee people, different careers. Everyone just assumes that all the guests are baristas or coffee roasters. But it's a huge industry, and there are people that touch it in all different areas. So I'm really excited that you're here. I want everyone to learn a little bit more about you to get started, though. Did you have kind of a first experience with coffee that you remember that made you think this was something that I'm interested in, or I'm going to keep trying, keep going?
Yeah. So I've always loved coffee. My mom jokes that she would put a little coffee in my bottle. I don't know if that's true or not, but I think the first time I actually especially understood and maybe fell in love a little bit with specialty coffee was in college. There was a guy on my floor, and he was from Portland, so we visited him. His name was Tim, and he worked at a roastery. So we did a cupping of coffees from mostly Africa, and then I think there was a Colombia and an Ecuador in there, and it was like 7 cups, and it was the first cupping I ever did. And they had like the old fashioned like garboon that you would spit between sips, and the learning to slurp and the explanation of the coffee hitting the, all of your tongue. And it was my first cupping ever. And I was seriously amazed at how different coffee could taste cup to cup to cup to cup. It just blew my mind. I was just like, I mean, I thought I knew what coffee tasted like, and it was bitter. I probably put a little bit of cream and sugar in it. Like, it was mostly what you get at the grocery store, but I still loved it. But this was so much better, and we didn't have to put anything in it. And it was a flavor bomb of like, my brain was going crazy. And so that was the first time that I realized that coffee from different parts of the world could taste completely different. I think the second story I had was, I was a designer and I lived on, lattes, and unfortunately I got into this groove with hazelnut lattes for a long time. I don't know. It was like my go-to stress drink was a hazelnut latte and a chocolate chip cookie.
Sounds excellent.
Yeah, yeah. It was when you're stressed, it's not bad. Uh, but I went to Torre Fazione Italia in Portland, and I asked for a latte with latte art. I thought it was beautiful. And I said, "Can I get a little hazelnut syrup?" And they're like, "We don't do syrups." And I was like, "Really?" And she explained how, like, when you steam the milk, the sugars are released and it tastes, you don't need it. So I trusted her. And that's when I was like, oh, espresso drinks don't need sugar if they're done properly. And that was another revelation of like, so I like black coffees and like single origins before, but like for espresso based drinks, I realized you don't have to have sugar. And it just took that kind of post college experience to understand that at a place that didn't allow me to have what I thought I wanted. So anyway.
I don't know that people on this show or that listen to this show know this, but I actually spent a year working as a barista, learning about coffee. That's kind of how I got started in this. And I remember what it was like for me, but I remember the first time a customer would come in and have a coffee, and we would go through that same explanation, that same process with them. And sometimes it didn't work, and they'd be like, nope, give me some sugar. But a lot of times you'd see this like light bulb go off. And that was such a cool experience to be able to offer people, like, oh, like, and to know, because I know what it was like for me and how you're explaining it for you, that it probably legitimately changed the rest of their life and how they engage with coffee.
Yeah, I'm unfortunately the guy. I mean, I'm I love coffee in so many different forms, so I'll always try something new. But yeah, I'm not. I'm the bummer guy who's like, you don't need to put all that sweet stuff in your.
Well, you mentioned at the top that you are the creative director and founder owner of Tekwani. Am I saying that right?
Yes, you are.
Tekwani?
Yeah.
Cool. But you had a career before that. You were in design before that. Can you explain to everyone what that means to be in design and what you were doing before what you're doing now?
Before the name change, I co-owned a design agency that did graphic design, and also I was a designer and my buddy Pete was a developer. And so the first life of that was what we called Wigwam Creative. And that was like a design web agency. And then before that, I worked 15 years at a company in Denver called Ellen Brust Design, and I was a lead creative senior designer. And what that meant was we would do logo and branding for different clients across all different spectrums of, hospitality, packaged goods, museums, like business, direct to business stuff. So it was not at all coffee specific, which is where Tekwani is leaning mostly. I would say 60% of what we do now is Tekwani's coffee related, and 40% is other industry related.
Well, let's talk about Tekwani just a little bit before we get into a whole slew of other
Sure.
topics that I had sent you. But
Yeah.
what does that name mean? And you mentioned that you had a previous business, Wigwam, with a partner.
Yeah.
When that phased away, was there a point where you thought, you know what, I don't want to be in charge anymore. I want to get another job and just have someone give me some cash?
Yeah.
I think that's two totally separate questions. So let's start with that question and then follow it up with you eventually decide, no, I'm going to go and we're going to keep going with Tekwani. What what was the impetus for that?
Yeah. So it was at the 2020 mid.
Oh, just when we were all making life decisions
Yes. Yeah.
universally.
Yeah. Exactly. Questioning our existence. Yeah, my business partner, he wanted to start a different business altogether. Didn't want to do development anymore. And yeah, I mean, I wondered about that. It's like that scene in The Matrix where the one character could be back in the Matrix and just be eating the imaginary food and just, and I liken that to like just working for someone. They tell you what to do, you do it, you go home, you're done. Yeah, that probably makes more sense. Um, But with the idea of buying out the business and then renaming it, and there's some different reasons for that. We can go into that in a second. But I had an opportunity to be like, wow, I can point this ship in any direction and or abandon ship altogether. It was probably getting a little older, and I'm like, I just, I kind of want to just make, and then also the opportunity to really like instead of co-leading, and honestly, I'm learning while I'm doing, like, I'm not the business guy. I love facing clients. I love talking about possibilities of projects, but like the running QuickBooks and doing the whole like working with the accountant and all that kind of stuff was I was aware of it, but not wearing that hat. So that's still not a fun hat, but I feel like it's been a good and very fast education. And I don't love it, but it allows me to do what I love and to steer the ship in any direction I want to go and like get some willing people to go along with me to do that. I honestly, as stressful as it is, and it is stressful, as doubtful as I can be, like, can I pull this off? Is this even possible? I have a conversation with the producer, and like we just had a call yesterday with a finca in Costa Rica, and it was so delightful. And I just light up, like getting to do what I do, which is reveal people's hopes and dreams, and in specifically the coffee world, and specifically at Origin. Just I don't know, I could eat off of that all day long and be very satisfied. It just makes me so incredibly happy that I feel like I'm almost supposed to do that or wired to do that. All the other stuff, I'll fumble and learn and get better at it. But because I just love that so much, it fuels and drives like everything I do.
What do you mean by that? You know, when you say you're a designer, you're a design firm,
Hmm.
and you say you just got off a call with a finca in Costa Rica. What are you doing for them? How is that work? What's the relationship there?
Yeah. We have a lot of different relationships and the needs for coffee. Like you said, the coffee industry's uh, the coffee supply chain or the circular, there's so many new words for this. Everything from farmers and producers to importers, exporters to people buying green coffee and roasting it to cafes, they all have different needs. We want to help add to the value of the coffee and design. People shop with their eyes, people perceive value. Coffee already is a commodity that people see with their eyes before they even cup it. In fact, like the history of coffee is like, the C market was decided on just by looks for a long time before people actually got into cupping it, which makes way more sense. That perception of the value of the coffee and the story of how that coffee is the generations of people producing that coffee, that it's a little bit of smoke and mirrors, I suppose, but or just helping using design, color, type, imagery, photography, illustration to kind of tell that story so that when people see this coffee from this finca and it's like, the way they're doing coffee and the way that they're trying to operate, telling that story well will add to the value of their product and help them either sell that coffee stateside through shipping, which is now more and more and more possible. And that's what's exciting about this is more countries of origin have the opportunity to roast in country and export. We have another client, Chica Bean in Guatemala. That's what they're doing, and it's working out very well for them. That allows, and we can dive into like the value of coffee and how it doesn't get valuable till it crosses the border and gets roasted stateside or in Asia or in Europe. So in a way, it's a little bit of a trying to use some of this social equity we have in the States and work with producers to add to the value of their products so that they can get more and do more in their countries of origin where the coffees come from. So
Sure. I think there's a stereotype of what a coffee farmer might look like or what their
sure.
life might be like that
Hmm.
I certainly had for a long time. And I think a lot of people's images of the coffee farmer was influenced by television commercials
Juan
showing, a
Valdez.
guy in a Juan
Yeah.
Valdez in a hat and a mustache. And this idea that there are these people working and essentially they're working to create a product that is for Americans. But that's not necessarily entirely true, obviously. I mean, we're a big market, but we're not the only coffee drinkers in the world. And I think what I want to make clear to people talking or listening is you work to create branding and identity and tell stories of domestic coffee brands and
Yes.
roasters and coffee shops. And then you're also working at the origin sites with those farms to do the same thing in a way that maybe hasn't been done regularly before, at least on a small scale, because instead of showing up and having this stereotype in their mind or when a roaster is buying green coffee, they're now be able to see and tell and share the story of where this coffee came from, which adds value to the farmer. They can ask for more money because they're providing some social commentary, which then the roaster can then tell their customers who are also willing to pay more because there's a connecting through line instead of just here's some coffee that showed up on a boat and its story started when it got here.
Right.
That's my impression of what it is that you're doing, and you're working with clients on both sides to try to create a more universal story, not just the first chapter.
Yeah, a much more well-rounded and maybe more informed. Yeah, if people could even get a sense of where the coffee comes from. A lot of what you just said is used in the marketing of coffee. And my mom's from El Salvador and my dad's Caucasian. So there's a stereotype of like the poor brown people raising the coffee and just it's in the best case, I guess, somewhat ignorant. In the worst case, there's these narratives that are out there with, and I don't want to dive too much into the world of politics because it gets messy and gross. But just to open up the conversation of the humanity that's happening in the coffee supply chain. I know when I'm stressed and I don't know what's going to happen that next day and I just need a minute, a cup of coffee just calms me down. It helps me focus. And I've seen coffee being enjoyed at Origin in the same ways, where people just love the communal aspects of the beverage. And you see families working together, and it's hard. And I just hope that by using design and opening these stories up, people can have a better sense of, well, who are the people on the other side of this supply chain? Or, oh, I didn't even know there was a supply chain. Like, where, how is coffee processed? How is it, how do they make decisions for the varieties or where it's grown or the elevation and all this stuff? And to like take facts and figures and make them more connected to humanity. And I think design is a quick way to do that.
I agree. I mean, I remember, I'm just remembering this right now as you're talking, but when I was much younger, I took a short part time job at an old Navy store in college, just during the holidays. And I remember one morning I noticed that a bunch of the products I was folding came from different places in the world, Indonesia, Vietnam, wherever. And I thought, well, that's interesting. I wonder how many places in the world I'm connected to in this store. And I walked around picking clothes off the shelf, and ultimately I found that they had clothes products made in 30 some different countries.
Mhm.
And that kind of blew my mind. And I didn't take that anywhere from that moment, but later in life, as I'm in coffee and starting to be aware, there's another person somewhere on the other side of this thing that I'm doing. There's a bunch of other people. We actually have a show coming out detailing the supply chain. Will come out kind of about the same time as this. We'll direct people to all those different levels
Cool.
from the farm. How
Yeah.
many steps it takes from the farm just to get into a container is more than you'd ever imagine.
Yeah.
I don't want to forget about your story, though, and the meaning of the name Tekwani.
Yeah. You asked it a while ago. Yeah.
I have a tendency to ask wide, big questions that take us off on tangents. That's on me. So let's get back to the meaning of Tekwani and what this company enables you to do in, where that came from and what that means to you.
I co-owned this company before. So I guess to explain how I got there, I'll do a little bit of backstory on the previous. So there were three owners. Two of us, oddly enough, were born on reservations. My one other friend, Russ, he was in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, and then I was born in Toppenish on the Yakama tribal nation. No direct affiliation with the tribal nations, but I'll get into a little bit more of that later too. So at that time, 10 years ago, this kind of being in Colorado and this romance of the West, Wigwam sounded like a good name. But as we evolved in our kind of understanding of everything, it's not even a native name. It's sort of just a jargonish, like, I don't know what else to compare it to, but it's like a anglified version of tribes in New York. So and then at the time at 2020 really was something like, I have a chance to reinvent, and about that time I did a 23andMe test because I was really reconnecting to my mom's side of the family. That's a whole other story I won't get into, but I was raised basically by my dad. But the last 10 years have been like on this journey of like connecting with my Latin roots and just more time with my mom. And that was part of the test and it came up that I was basically a quarter Native American. And I'm like, well, what's that all about? So I talked to my tia Albita, and she's like, well, it's the academic term is Pipil. Nawa is the more correct version, and this is an indigenous people group from Western El Salvador. In fact, pupusas, if you're familiar with Salvadoran cuisine, that is almost like a 2,000-year-old native dish. All of this is tied with the Nawa people. And then as I wanted to kind of pay some homage and honor to that, because there's a coffee story here that's quite tragic. I mean, if you ever have a chance to read Coffee Land by Augustine Sedgwick, I highly recommend it. If you can't get through it, then audiobook it. It's a recounting of the 400 years of coffee in El Salvador. And kind of one of the, other than it founding in like the 1800s, in 1932, there was an uprising of the indigenous people who were the coffee workers. And it resulted in a massacre of 30,000 in like 1 or 2 days. And there's this burial site. It happened in a few different towns, but Izalco is where this site is. And I had an opportunity when I took my second trip to El Salvador. The first was when I was 2 for 6 months, and I don't remember it. But to actually go to this site, and it was heavy. I mean, it was very emotional. How it to realize that parts of my family, if they hadn't survived that uprising, I wouldn't be here. And the cost of coffee and the history of coffee, as much as I love it, and El Salvador and coffee are like so intrinsically intertwined now. I mean, it's so much part of that pride and identity, and that's what I love about coffee culture in El Salvador. Is there's a lot of pride about the product, but the history is just like people don't necessarily want to talk about it so much, and this La Matanza is something that everyone knows about. It's just a footnote in history that's horrific. Because that the language stopped being spoken, people stopped dressing in indigenous dress, and everybody assimilated. And so I signed up to take a class in Nahuatl. I'm not at all proficient, but just to get a familiarity with this culture. There are these teachers that I signed up for in this class, and just observing some of the rituals and ceremony, and just understanding that culture more because it's part of my roots. So from that, long way to answer this question, Tekwani is a Nawa word for jaguar. Jaguar happens to be my Nawale, which is sort of like my birth sign or spirit animal. The interesting thing about the jaguar in Mayan mythology is it was a transformational being that could travel both the underworld, the night world, and the day world, and that's why it has the spots. It likes reflective of of the the sky, and it had this ability to understand two different worlds. And I was like, this makes so much sense to me because I have this Anglo heritage, and I have this like indigenous and Iberian Spanish heritage, and I'm a designer. So I travel different worlds all the time. I dip and dive into healthcare. I dip and dive into beauty products or coffee or whiskey or, you name it, like whatever. I have to absorb and understand these stories. The Jaguar is also this holder and revealer of dreams, which is also a role I feel like designers do. Hannah, who's lead designer, we worked on the design together on the mark. It's kind of infusing some of that indigenous and Mayan naming. And just also, when I was taking the classes, I was like, is this okay? Because, I don't want to make another wigwam mistake. And it's like, well, it's your story, it's your roots. And yeah, share this language. We were reviving this language in El Salvador. So, yeah, long answer to that question, but that is why Tekwani.
You say long answer, but I think you just condensed several hundred years of history down into about a minute and a half. So not too bad at all. Very efficient. We actually met at the Specialty Coffee Association Expo in Portland. You were stationed right across from the design kind of awards wall, and I noticed your design right away. Getting into a lot of my own background here because we share a lot of similarities. But I went to design school and ended up working in design for a long time and was terrible at it, or just not the best at it. But I still love it and appreciate design as an art form and as a skill set. You just said something about dipping into other worlds and how that relates to the name and the Jaguar in general. How do you go about absorbing a brand's story and then presenting it as an identity when you can't necessarily physically get there? You're talking about working at Origin and in other industries as well, but it's not like you can go and visit every farm, just every weekend and then come
No.
back to work, right? So how do you work with a client to say, hey, let me absorb as much of what I can about you and what you're doing so that I can then present the story that you feel represents you?
I feel like design is a mirror and it reflects two things. To make that mirror work, we have to understand and listen a lot and ask a lot of questions to the client, and what is this product they're offering the world, and why does that matter to them? And so a lot of questions about, their backstory, like why are you even caring about this, and why should that matter to anybody else? But also to try to understand the audience they're trying to reach. Who are the people? Who are these personas that? And that's like asking the client questions and then doing a lot of research about who are these types of people that might connect with that. Because when what you're offering the world connects with what people really need and want, that intersection is pretty magical space. If design is right, it will help people see what you're offering with what you need and want most. So a lot of listening. And I would say, if at all possible, go and try to be in those worlds if you can, or at least like worlds. When I made the decision we wanted to focus more on coffee, I told Hannah at the time, we're going to Origin, and we can't understand what it means to brand coffee if we don't understand where coffee comes from and how it's and my natural connection was through El Salvador, so that's why we went there. And we went with some other people that of like mind that just wanted to absorb the process of growing it, processing it, and then I've even gone as far as to like ask friends who own coffee shops, like, can you train me a little bit to like when you need help, steam milk and be on bar and see. So I've done that. I've dabbled with roasting, not to be a roaster because that's not what I'm going to do, but to just have an understanding of all the aspects of packaging. I understood, design I understood, but even retail environments or coffee experiences. So I would say listening when you can't be there, doing a lot of research, asking interview questions, Zoom calls, and then trying to really understand who the market is. And you can do a lot of this online, but you're going to get so much more information if you do take the effort to at least no, we can't go to every farm, but we can go to one farm and just understand the process. And then with that baseline, see how everybody else does it different. Because they do. We visited two wildly different farms, Carlos and Patty Pola, and they're like generational farmer producers who do really innovative things with soil and the land and the mycorrhizomes and all of that cool stuff. But then we went to Los Naranjos, which is like much bigger operation, and they've got coffee contracts with Starbucks and just the whole gamut of like small farms, mid-sized farms, big farms, and all that. So, but that way coffee is produced has some similarities or some, baseline similarities. It's just scales a lot different. So,
I want to take a quick step back and ask you what I think is a very complex question, but I think might have a simpler answer, and I could be wrong. I apologize. You're working with origin farmers, you're working with local coffee roasters. If I'm a coffee roaster and I'm hiring you to design, say, not just the brand, but like a package and something that people are going to take home with them, what makes a coffee bag stand out on the shelf? I mean, I absolutely buy bottles of wine and books and things because of the label or the cover. And coffee is no, I mean, I buy coffee because it's what I do, but I used to buy it based on the logos or the branding. What do you think makes something stand out? Or is that even a fair question to ask?
no, I think it's a fair question to ask. I mean, you go to like Expo and they have the design awards and they have a lot of packages on the shelf and they're all so different. And there's trends. There's like crafty looking bags that are like brown and craft paper, have that sort of aesthetic. I would say 90s coffee house aesthetic. Then there's like ultra modern and like really sleek and sophisticated. There was this one package that was ridiculous. It was bonkers. It was really cool. I think an NBA player, I can't remember the name of it, but I think you may have seen it. It was like, it looked like chrome and it was really cool. And then like everything in between. So for me, what makes a coffee brand stand out is if it truly reflects why whoever it is, whether it's the farmer or it's a roaster or it's a coffee house. And like one client we have, Bluegrass, and they are a whiskey, Kentucky whiskey bar by night and a coffee house by day. And they name all their coffees after Kentucky Derby winners. And it's like in Arvada, Colorado, it's like this local vibe. And it's so uniquely itself. It would be not appropriate for any other coffee package. And people love it. They feel like it's really reflective of the Derby and the whiskey and Kentucky and all of the stuff. So it needs to be 100% itself. And that's going to be different than, some like West Coast sophisticated coffee experience kind of client. So the answer to that is it just needs to be intrinsically reflective. I mean, it just needs to be real and authentic to whatever the person is that is telling that particular coffee story. If it's not, if it's trying to look like another brand, it's like, oh, I want to look like Onyx because Onyx is amazing and everybody loves Onyx and I need it to look like, it's not going to go well. It might look cool, but it just won't have any stickiness to it. It won't have any resonance or meaning. So I think it just has to be wildly individualistic and authentic and true to whoever it is that's putting their blood, sweat, and tears into either roasting that coffee or producing that coffee. Does that answer that question?
Sure, I think authenticity is important and trending is different. I think we could say there's some hard and fast rules, no Comic Sans. Let's just start there and go from there. But
Yeah.
no, I think that's a good way to say it. I think the design won't work if the person who it's reflecting doesn't believe in it.
Not only that, but there may be some real variables. Some people have a lot of resources and they can put a lot of money into that packaging, like a engraved box with a custom sleeve and, a whole really cool way of doing that. Other people, all they have is sourcing a bag and like trying to put some kind of sticker on it. So part of what I think it is too is it's got to be engineered to what will work. I don't think anyone needs to get in debt for packaging, and packaging can be beautiful and successful and scalable. And yeah, if it takes off, if your dream takes off and you're selling a lot of coffee and then you want to go the next level with a custom bag, we'll love to do it. But we don't want to make anybody, we just want to scale up and be with people. And that, I guess, is the other part of the design process, is understanding where a client's at and their resources and working within that sandbox and be like, you know what? Once this takes off, or if it's already successful and you need to take it the next level, we're just going to meet people where they're at and not tell them to be someplace that they, just because we think it needs to look cool. That's wildly irresponsible to me and not very honoring to where they're at in their business. So I think you have to have a little bit of ethics about it too. Designers, I mean, you give them carte blanche, we'll go crazy. We'll do all sorts of nutty things because we think it'll look beautiful, but it has to work. It has to make business sense for the client.
That brings up kind of that concept. I mean, you're making things look beautiful, you're sharing a story, telling a story. It's not necessarily your story, but it is the sharing of a story. How do you balance kind of the ethical or the environmental impacts of your work product? Because a lot of your work product is designed to be produced into something, a coffee bag, a brand, a website, or a shirt or something, right? It's creating this identity that's sharing a story, and what comes along with that is stuff.
Yeah. So people won't throw away stuff that they feel is valuable. So in some ways, designing something that is unique and beautiful will help people not just toss it away, but they see themselves in that story, so they want to like have it be part of their brand, I guess, by wearing it and showing off their like branded, you know, mug or to go coffee, tumbler or whatever. And yeah, we do care and we do often suggest, thankfully everyone's on board in specialty coffee about trying to do things better by the environment. But there's these things like you can get 100% compostable bags, but if you put a sticker on it, all of a sudden it's not compostable, or the government or the local government won't support the recycling of this particular. So you just have to ask a lot of questions and ask like, well, what? So yes, we always want to be responsible in like we don't want something that can't break down. But if it breaks down in 5 years, or if it breaks down, like there's different decisions you can make on different products. Thankfully, the coffee space is very conscious about this. You're hard pressed to find a printer that isn't going to have a product that is made with recyclable materials or in that regards. There's other industries where we could, I guess, design stuff that I feel like would be, but I feel like the coffee industry is very environmental aware and also socially aware, like, but it's easy to be performative in that regard and to so I guess my workaround to that is relationships.
Hmm.
I heard this. I don't know if I read this on Spreads or something, but like there was people who were trying to do this, like tell the story of the farmer, and they had some type of country of origin, and I think it was Central American coffee, but they were showing African beds drying from Africa. So like this wildly, and the intention was to show where coffee comes from, and but like without an understanding relationship with where who are the actors producing this coffee, you can get it really wrong. And you're thinking you want to work alongside and with producing countries. You don't want to like save them with your like conscious storytelling. So I feel like part of what will keep that from happening is really meeting and understanding. And if you can't meet in person, get on a Zoom call and meet the farmer and see what's going on in their community. What are the needs? And like, and that's the other thing. Programs are great, and I believe in supporting like specified programs for education and healthcare. But if that coffee sells well, that community is going to be helped. So it's not always a service project or something good to do. It's they need to sell coffee, and it's a business. So like helping that happen is going to make life better. I say that, but there's some specific causes. There's a Honduras coffee that we work on for a school that I believe in. I'm going there June 17th, actually.
Well, that was my next question, was to ask kind of about your some of your mission based work and some of your social impact. If you were to say, I want Tekwani to make this sort of impact, what are some of those things that you're doing now and hope to do in the future?
Yeah. So ideally, we would, for every country we're working with, we can find a partnership or a way to like an initiative that is being run locally. Like the only people who are going to know how to make Honduras better are Hondureños. Same thing with El Salvador. Same thing with Guatemala or wherever, Africa, Kenya, or Ethiopia. So let the locals know what works best in their community. But then if sourcing and a coffee project can help add awareness and benefit, then yeah. So we have a coffee project in Tegucigalpa for a school, and they've been running since 1971, and they teach entrepreneurial skills to boys and girls from kindergarten up through high school. I have been to the school many times, and I love what they do and believe in what they do. So we have a coffee project called Esperanza Dulce that so we source the coffee from Honduras from women producers, and there's reasons for that too because of the machismo culture, and it's kind of a way of addressing that. So we source it right, and then we roast it with a roaster, and he believes in the project as well, and the proceeds go to back to the school. And we do a lot of this coffee through churches, and we're saying like you're drinking coffee every Sunday, and so why not have this coffee make an impact, because and a long-term impact, not a one and done make you feel good thing, but and then also get to know the school. And so it works out really well. It's this school, we've been able to raise like $250,000 over the last 5 years with awareness around coffee and this product. And that is we lead trips to like have people be aware of what they're doing, but that's like helping with, they have a dentistry school now, and they have students in the dentistry school that are opening up practices in Honduras, and there's so many cool things. And it's just kind of connecting people with, oh, I'm drinking this coffee from Honduras, and it's benefiting this country, and I'm just having a relationship with it, and I'm aware of where my food comes from. And rather than being exploitive in these products in the past, banana, and that can be in any industry, but I'm focusing on coffee. So that's one example. Another one is this language school. I mentioned the Nawa classes. So I took these classes. So we worked on a coffee project this past for the holidays for the language cradles and preserving and teaching this indigenous language and culture. We were able to co-roast this coffee, this label here, this Tutunik Atuntun, which means hot coffee in Nahuatl. It was able to be roasted in El Salvador, and it was a featured coffee at one of the hot coffee shops in San Salvador, and a few different places. It sold for $10 a bag in El Salvador and 20 stateside, and so it was co-roasted with a roaster here in Denver. And then next year we're going to go even further with it and have it be part of our Tablon coffee roasters. They're going to hopefully, I mean, we're on board with this, but like it'll be their holiday offering. So it'll scale up. And then that money is just going to help with a new school center that they're having and educational materials. And that to me, we had talked previously, but Juliana, who she's a Nancine, and there's a matriarchal culture of teachers. And when we were asking about this coffee project, she had us in the ceremony to bless the coffee. So we were on the grounds where this massacre took place. She was inviting it's on a Catholic church grounds where the field is. She would invite the priest to have some of the coffee, and we were doing this Mayan ritual and asking for, is this okay? They called it the seed of discord coffee because of all of its hardship. And to bring this full circle, I said, is this okay? And she's like, well, we love coffee. and and the ancestors, they want to have it be a seed of harmony instead of discord. So those are those personal connections, those possibilities that happen when you listen and you visit and you build these relationships. And it's just so much more meaningful. And it makes the coffee richer. You understand kind of the suckiness of the coffee industry, but you also get the hope of it and how coffee does connect. It does these cool things to the human brain that, makes things possible. The history of coffee goes along with the history of like industrial revolution and the Enlightenment. And like, it's crazy. It's only been around for not even a full, 1,000 years, like 400 to 500 years. And it's progressed humanity somewhat. It's kind of weird. But so the fact that coffee could be something that brings people together instead of divides people is really cool. So I'm long-winded. I talk too much on these things, but you asked the question. I'm on your long-form podcast, so there you go.
Yeah, I'm the one who's going to have to edit it, Charles.
Yeah, okay,
So no worries.
good.
I got the time. I'd rather get that story out. I mean, I feel like I could talk to you for hours, and maybe we'll do that over, the time that we get a chance to be engaged with each other. We've met over coffee, and now we're having this conversation. If you were to say, hey, these are the types of clients that I hope are listening to this and want to work with me in the coffee space, who is that, that you are approaching, or that, I mean, I'm assuming you're a design firm, but you have agency in who you work with, especially now.
Yeah.
Who is that client for you that is like the ideal Tekwani client?
I'm reading this Making Coffee Better book about how Mayan farmers and third wave tastemakers create value. So we've done a project for a roaster in Kenya. So, and we thankfully we're doing these new engagements with Indonesian coffees too, and some relationships we made. So I'm not like I know I come at this like strongly from a Central American bent because it's history and family and all of that. But I would say if we can use design to help add value to coffee from the bottom up, from the producing countries up, I want to talk to you. Any way to make that happen, I'm totally interested. If you love coffee, and I do, you're passionate and you care about where your coffee comes from and how you're sourcing it, I definitely want to have a conversation. And that, we have small roasters doing amazing things in the United States, really working hard to create these relationships I just talked about, caring about where the coffee comes from and wanting to share that story. But if you just want to do a drop ship business about coffee, we'll talk to you, because honestly, that's going to Robin Hood a lot of these other projects. Design is expensive in the sense of, to do everything we want to do takes a lot of time and effort. And oftentimes, in some cases, that's just not possible. So we can like spread rates, work with clients in different ways, especially at Origin, by doing a lot of coffee work in general. So I'll talk to anybody in the coffee space and beyond, but I don't know. It's more and more coffee. So I think that's where this is all heading and how it's been heading. So yeah.
What did we not talk about today that you want people to know about you or about your company, or just generally speaking? If you had to say, here's like a one sentence lesson from what I want you to take away, what is that?
I mean, I joked about a working tagline or maybe some kind of content thing, but that there really is no such thing as a cup of coffee, just a cup of coffee. And what I mean by that is, like you said, there's so many hands involved in this drink. And also, it's a drink that we've made common, and it isn't, it's like humans. It's like, human resources. It's such a special drink. And there's so many different beautiful, unique cultures and people in this beverage that we're doing ourselves a disservice about commoditizing it. And yeah, are you going to spend as much on a cup of coffee as you do on a fine cocktail or a really good craft whiskey or a wine that's estate bottled? I think you should. I think it's that special. And so if design and storytelling and reconnecting helps people discover this beautiful beverage and appreciate it more, that's what I hope happens with Tekwani Design Co. helping. Our small part in that is what all of us are in this coffee to do, is we love this drink and we want it celebrated and appreciated. So
You already mentioned Bluegrass. I believe I got that name right. Coffee. I'm going to be coming to Denver in a couple of weeks. What is one shop I have to go to? And if you were to go there, what are you going to order?
I would say I always point people towards Sweet Bloom. We didn't do the branding. But
I love the tone there.
yeah.
We didn't do that, but
No. It's beautiful. Made Shop did it with Andy Springer and crew, and it's beautiful. It's great. I like it. But the way they source coffee and the way they roast coffee is my favorite. Well, I have a few favorites, but yeah, for sure Sweet Bloom. And if we were to go to Sweet Bloom, I would just ask what are you guys into right now, and surprise me with, we would get V60. We would just sit and savor that and like talk about it and geek out over it. Yeah.
all right. Well, I do have one last question for you today. I've never asked another guest this question, so you're my guinea pig. Are you for or against Helvetica?
I am for Helvetica if you use it well and not as just a quick, fast cheat to look cool.
Well, I'm going to link to the Helvetica movie for anyone who's
I love the
listening to
Helvetica
this.
movie. Yeah,
It's
well
so
worth-
good.
yeah.
And if you've never thought about the font that is in a book you read or the newspaper or on a package, this will change you'll start seeing it everywhere. There's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
Charles, I really appreciate you taking an hour. I mean, I feel like we've just scratched the surface of what you're doing and where you're going. And maybe you've just scratched the surface too. This is a whole new endeavor over the last couple of years. And I sense a lot more coming, and hopefully we can touch base again.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. It feels really good to like externally process a lot of stuff that's in my head. And the one last thing I would say real quick on all of this is I am learning by doing. I don't know how to do this all well, and there's already people in the industry further along this path than I am. There's other sort of similar design shops like the Levco that are equally minded, that and we like exchange some emails, and there's plenty of space in the coffee industry to reimagine and redo this better. So we're all learning together. And I'm by no means an expert. I am learning a ton, and I'm thankful for opportunities like this to share things that I've been learning. And I'm self-conscious that I'm over talking, but it's fine. You can edit.
Okay, some key takeaways today. Charles, aka Carlos or Charlos, depending on the company and the locale, is learning while doing. He's very open about the reality that we all, himself included, make some mistakes, and it's a good lesson. We get better by constantly doing, learning, tweaking, and doing again. One of the goals of Tekwani Design is to uplift producers at origin. They do so by using the skills and connections they have in their toolbox to tell stories, hopefully creating additional value. To quote Charles, they want to use their design efforts to reveal people's hopes and dreams. Tekwani is the indigenous Nawa word for jaguar. I apologize if I mispronounce that. According to TekwaniDesign.com and Charles, in Mayan culture, the jaguar travels between worlds, day and night, as a holder and revealer of dreams. It really fits with their design ethos. Coffee is one of the mediums Charles has been using to explore his ever-evolving worldview, his career, and journey of self-discovery. He hopes to use his company and skills to offer grace and humanity to others, and although I imagine it is difficult, himself too. If we're doing it right, we're all continually growing as humans. If you're like me, it is with a cup of coffee in hand. You can learn more about Charles and Tekwani Design on roastwestcoast.com, and I'll make sure the important links, like that link to the Helvetica movie and the Coffeeland book, are there, and in this show's podcast notes, so hopefully you can find them wherever you're listening. That supply chain column I mentioned will be published as part of our new Crossings Coffee column on the website. Subscribe to the newsletter now, and it'll be in your feed shortly. Thank you to Charles for spending the time sharing his story, and for turning me onto some new-to-me coffee history, and for using his design skills for good, and coffee. And thanks to you for listening to the stories of coffee people, for being inspired by their entrepreneurial efforts, and supporting this podcast. If you're in the early stages of your coffee journey, we want to support you too. Season 2 of the Coffee Smarter Education podcast is already underway. The first episode on blade versus burr grinders is already out. Search for Coffee Smarter on your favorite podcasting platform and hit that follow or subscribe button. That show is geared to enable you to brew a better cup of coffee at home. In addition to this podcast presenting sponsor, who I mentioned earlier, Roastar Coffee Packaging, found at roastar.com, this podcast is supported by some great coffee industry partners, including Coffee Cycle Roasting, Ignite Coffee Company, Maria Coffee, First Light Whiskey, Cape Horn Coffee Importers, Joe, I'm headed your way soon, Zumbar Coffee and Tea, Ascend Coffee Roasters. Be sure to check out Ascend's ever-expanding list of events on ascendroasters.com. Mostra Coffee Company, Steady State Coffee Roasting, San Franciscan Roaster Company, Crossings Coffee, Acento Coffee Roasters, Camp Coffee Company, and Hasea Coffee Source. Coffee People will be back next week with Will Etherington, the sales director at Techniform Mocha Master, the producers of the Mocha Master Coffee Brewer, which Chris O'Brien of Coffee Cycle Roasting recommended on the last episode of Coffee Smarter Season 1. You can find that show right here wherever you're listening, about a week from now. This episode of the Coffee People podcast, which is part of the Roast West Coast Coffee Network, has been written, produced, and recorded by me, Ryan Woldt. I hope this episode has found you happy, healthy, and with at least a thread of sanity left, enabling you to make it through the day. Always tip your baristas and be sure to drink good coffee.